I think it would be a good idea if every day, every individual would look at himself in the mirror earnestly and ask the question, who am I? Am I a weak person? Am I a defeated person? Am I an inferior person? Not at all. I am a child of God, and I was intended to get on top of things, and I was intended to stay there.
Very good. That was very long. Very long. Notice how he went on and on and on. Let's hear the prayer. I mean the song. You sing the song now.
It's no exaggeration to say that our guest is one of the most influential filmmakers of all time. He developed the medium of direct cinema. Welcome, Albert Maysles.
What are you doing down there? You standing there?
Just filming the main room.
Whiskers! Well, did you know that Whiskers has disappeared? A cat got out. I'm trying to get it in. We don't know how he got out.
I wasn't worried about the film hurting them in any way.
You weren't?
No, not at all.
Not making them grotesque and...
Because both my brother and I were so fond of them, so respectful of them, and so much, as we always are, concerned that all we have to do is tell the truth.
It's hard to imagine looking at the movie Grey Gardens that it could have gotten any weirder or more grotesque.
The noise we heard. The raccoon did that to my new home. Isn't that terrible? They'll have the whole house down soon.
The documentary genre is about revealing something that's been concealed, showing the audience something real about the world that they've never seen before. Grey Gardens was a prototype for a new kind of film, one that let people be themselves without direction, called cinema verite, or direct cinema.
Good Lord.
It's a film about a mother and a daughter, Big Edie and Little Edie Beale, the cousins of Jackie Kennedy Onassis, living in their broken-down mansion and their broken-down dreams, and just how much the past can impact the present.
She was a girl with everything, money, looks, and social position. Her mother, a classic Bouvier beauty. Now, they live amongst the souvenirs of their lives in Grey Gardens. This is their story, a love story, sort of. Hailed as one of the oddest, most beautiful films ever created.
Come on, we're not ready.
Grey Gardens, in New York, exclusively at the Paris Theater.
Grey Gardens has all the things that make a great film. It's incredibly immersive. There are so many good pieces of dialogue. It's a very quotable film. And the conflict between Big and Little Edie is fascinating. It's relatable in the sense that these two characters, these two real people, are dealing with not only societal expectations, but familial expectations. And I think the conflict revolves around the people that we love and the lives that we want to create for ourselves is really an interesting and emotional thing to watch.
This film is a foundational work of documentary, setting the stage for many films to follow. But ever since its release, the same question has come up over and over again. Does Grey Gardens exploit the Beales? The issue of privacy is common in documentary. Oftentimes, the subjects in the films accuse filmmakers of portraying them inaccurately, or of not getting their permission to be filmed to begin with. A whole field of documentary ethics has emerged from these issues. Directors are obligated to get consent from their subjects to ensure that the film's release doesn't harm them in any way, and that the people in the film get to speak for themselves, rather than be subjected to the director's point of view.
So I think this is the best costume for the day.
Okay.
I have to think these things up, you know.
These are all basic ethical practices, but confusingly, Grey Gardens fulfills all of them.
They came by the house several times, and I kept saying, "Let's do a movie." We began spontaneously. I trusted them immediately. They were a part of us, and we were a part of them. I guess I missed my brothers. People say we shouldn't have had the Maysles in our house, but they weren't holding a gun on us. I just wanted to show myself off as an entertainer, and I wish the film had me doing 6 more dances. But what they did was right. Factual. They get the pith of every situation. There's no difference in the way we lead our lives and what you see. Mother and I sort of go beyond time. I think that's what the Maisels captured. We've always been objects of great curiosity, so I don't think this will make anything any worse.
We all march together, for love is behind. We all stand together, united we die. All march together, for we love the land. It's the spirit of me and mine. We all march together, for life is
Here, Kitty, I got a big, nice piece of white. Here, Kitty. Cat's going to the bathroom. Right in back of my portrait.
God, isn't that awful?
No, I'm glad he is. I'm glad somebody's doing something they want to do.
Calvin Pryluck is considered one of the most important writers on the question of documentary ethics. In one of his essays, he writes that the ethical issues with documentary are far broader than had been previously established. Documentary, he says, is a coercive medium. It makes people say and do things they wouldn't normally do. Further, no one can really consent, because there is no way for someone to truly understand just how much a documentary will invade their privacy. He writes, "The right of privacy is part of this broader right of personality, which includes the right to be free of harassment, humiliation, shame, and indignity." In 1976, Calvin Pryluck interviewed one of the directors of Grey Gardens, Albert Maisels.
Let's say I'm walking along the street and there's a drunk who's retching in the corner. I'm not gonna stare at him. It's not simply I don't want to watch him, so much as the fact he's got his right to privacy at that moment.
He's got a right to his privacy, but at the same time, maybe the reason he's an alcoholic is because no one's paying attention to him. He doesn't need people passing him by. Let the camera take part in the recognition. There's not a single category of person who shouldn't be filmed. You know, people are eager to say, Edie Beale, she's senile, and the other's demented. They're incompetent, so you can't film that. I'm all for filming incompetent people. They're the ones who need it the most. If you say the incompetent ones aren't to be filmed, we're really closing our eyes to it. Really, it's the incompetent people, probably more than anyone, who need to be in a movie because they have this sense of not being recognized, of being nobody, of a loss of identity. They can feel it. If you let the camera recognize their points of strength, though, they begin to develop this sense of identity, this sense of recognition, this sense of belief. Let's not deprive them of being filmed because we're trying to protect them.
T for two and two for T, and me for you and you for me. Hello?
Pryluck, like many other audience members and critics, feels that the film robs the Beales of their dignity. Maisels counters this argument by asserting that there is no real dignity in being hidden. Further, there's never been a definitive statement on the Beales' mental capacity, one way or the other, making it a fruitless direction for further inquiry.
God, nothing schizophrenic about my nature.
But the bigger question here that Pryluck and Maisels are grappling with is, who decides dignity?
We can raise a family. A girl for you, a boy for me. Oh, can't you see how happy we could be?
In the early works on privacy, space was often used to determine what was considered public and what was considered private. If it happened inside your home, it was private. Outside, it's public. We all kind of hold this view today, too. When we're at home, we want to have some semblance of privacy. And so when we begin the film Grey Gardens inside the home of these two women, it does feel like an invasion. And it would be, if the Beals didn't consent to the filmmakers being there. That consent remained all throughout their lives.
Once we finished the film, we wanted the first people to see it. It would be the mother and the daughter. So we brought the film to Grey Gardens with a projector. We showed it to them, and there was a moment of silence, and then Edie walked back and forth in the room and in an extremely loud voice shouted, "The Maisels have created a classic."
For years, there's never been a basis for the claim that Grey Gardens violated the Beals' privacy. That's in part because privacy has been looked at as a two-player game. Researchers have insisted on analyzing the issue of privacy just as it relates between the Maisels and the Beals. But there's someone else involved. Us. Daniel Solove is a privacy researcher who rejects many of the traditional notions of privacy in his book, Understanding Privacy. He argues that privacy has to be considered in view of society's influence on individuals, specifically in terms of the enforcement of social norms, norms that guide the behavior of people in everyday life and tell them what to do and not to do. Solove writes, "The harm caused by privacy problems often stems from the power of social norms, which can sometimes be excessive, misplaced, and unproductive. Sometimes even protection against desirable norms can be socially beneficial. We may not want to change or abolish certain norms, but we may want them to be imperfectly enforced. Conformity is socially beneficial only to a point. We naturally judge and condemn, even though our judgment can be stifling and counterproductive if it's not carefully controlled and restrained. Privacy enables people to escape from the relentless force of social judgment, which, in too pervasive a dose, can stifle self-development. Privacy is thus a protection of the individual for the good of the society."
Two roads diverged in yellow wood, and pondering each. Pondering one, I took the other, and that made all the difference.
Robert Frost.
Isn't that wonderful?
Did he say that?
That's all you need, just three lines like
is that Robert Frost?
Who else? Two roads
I think you're
diverged in yellow wood.
Come on, you said that. We want something else.
And pondering one, I took the other.
You're not teaching
and
us.
that made all
we
the
don't
difference.
want to learn it. It's very pretty.
Isn't that amazing?
Two things happen when privacy is removed. The first is that the Beals become vulnerable to society.
Here's how Jackie Kennedy's relatives fell from grace and went from riches to a life of handouts.
Dark family secret.
They live in squalor amongst tons of cats.
Poverty and squalor in East Hampton.
Crippled, so damaged. The destitution.
People feel really empowered by watching this freak up on stage.
The garbage-ridden, filthy 28-room house with 52 stray cats, fleas, cobwebs, and no running water.
There's a general prejudice against unconventional people who don't cut their grass, who don't keep their house clean, who have lots of cats and raccoons, because they're crazy and we need to protect them. And the way to protect them is by not allowing them the freedom to express themselves.
The second thing that happens is society becomes vulnerable to the Beals.
The audience brings with them their own likes and dislikes, their own prejudices, their own fears, and their own value systems. So if you have someone in the audience who's from the middle class, the value system they bring with them is cleanliness. People from the middle class dream that they can get ahead and move up higher, have an automobile or two, have a house in a certain range of income. They all want to work. You could go on. And if I described all of that, I would describe exactly what the Beals put down. Their value system completely contradicts it. It's not an easy thing for people from the middle class to understand how somebody from the upper class could leave all that. They try to deny it because it threatens their existence as middle-class people.
People have loved Grey Gardens for so long because there's so much charm in watching these people live their lives the way they want to, even though there's a lot of dipping back into the past. I think they were pretty content, and it's kind of bewildering to see these two once wealthy women live the way they do, but it's also endearing.
The Beals are who they are and have no intention of changing that, not for anyone. Society accepts that as long as they hide themselves away. Out in the open and unashamed, the Beals threaten how we view the world and what we value, down to the very capitalistic system that we try to move ahead through. The Beals are invulnerable to the opinions of others. They gave up their privacy because they wanted to be seen, because they wanted to be recognized. We don't want to recognize them. We don't want to see that there are other ways of living, other ways of being outside our social norms. And yet, their humanity forces us to realize just how fragile those norms were in the first place. They don't want to be like us. But at times, against our better judgment, we might want to be a bit more like them. All through his life, Albert Maysles was asked if Grey Gardens was exploitive. His whole life, he defended his film, but the question still remains. Did Grey Gardens violate the Beals' privacy? Well, yes, but they themselves are the violators. They puncture the veil of privacy, separating themselves in the world. And through our onlooking, we are challenged. We are reminded that our ways are not the only ways. And when we respond by claiming that the Beals were robbed of their dignity, we're really complaining that we've been robbed of ours.
Did you ever feel, though, while you were taping, boy, this woman thinks we're going to get her out of here. This woman thinks that we're an opportunity to Did you ever feel kind of uncomfortable about the delusion she had about you?
Actually, in the largest sense, we did get them out of there, in that they've got the movie.
Right. It's true. It's true.
And they got out of,
you gave her what she wanted, which was to be a star.
Touche, all right.
They got out of there exactly on their own terms, being exactly themselves. No different, no better, no worse.